Greetings and thank you for tuning in to my latest video. I will be uploading this on Sunday, the 18th of May, 2025, and I'm going to be talking about the recently completed federal election. We've had a couple weeks to kind of digest things, as it were. With politics and people who follow politics, passions can run high. And so I think having a little distance between the actual day, the election day, the actual event, and getting some distance enables you to garner some perspective. And I like to think that I offer a different take, a different perspective than others might have. And I try to avoid being overly partisan. But with that being said, I have to admit a bias. I had a preference in this most recent election. My preference was for Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada. So obviously, I was not thrilled, to put it mildly, with the results of the election. But with that being said, having removed myself a couple, almost 2 weeks now since Canadians went to the polls on April 28th, or a little longer if you voted in an advance poll, which is what I did. It gives you some time to dissect and to ruminate over the results and to possibly seek out, from a conservative perspective, what went wrong, and from a liberal perspective, hey, what went right? Uh, and before I really get rolling, I've scripted this out, so I'll be reading my notes. But before I really get rolling, firstly, thank you to everyone who has recently subscribed to my channel. In the past 2 weeks, I've added somewhere around 40 to 50 new subscribers. I'm up over 12, well over 1,200 now. And it was 3 weeks ago, I was stuck in around 1,170. So there's been a fair bit of growth. I do appreciate it. Uh, I'm an old 58-year-old guy, Canadian, trying to elbow his way in to the crowded YouTube space. There's that famous, elbows up, trying to elbow my way in to this crowded YouTube space. And given the fact that I'm a 58-year-old white male Christian straight, I kind of tick off all the boxes of cancel culture. Sit down and shut up, boomer, even though I'm not a baby boomer. I'm close. I'm close, born 1966. The baby boom is generally regarded as having ended in and around 1964, although some people who study demographics do push it as far as 66. So I'm right on that bubble of being a boomer Xer. Kind of have a foot in both camps, if you will. But anyway, that's enough preamble. You're welcome to like, share, subscribe. I appreciate it. And I love the comments being filled. Um, whether you're for or against what I have to say, I appreciate encountering differing perspectives. And at any rate, without any further ado, uh, the question I'm asking is, how did Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives manage to lose the election? And as I was saying, it's been nearly 2 weeks since Canadians went to the polls to elect a new parliament. And that strikes me as a decent enough passage of time to allow for some reflection on the results. People do get passionate about their politics, and the immediate euphoria for liberals and angst for the conservatives, it takes time to simmer down enough for careful consideration. And I'm here to tell you the Liberals are 100% justified in being very pleased with the results. They didn't gain a majority, of course, but they came damn close. And given how far they had fallen under Justin Trudeau's leadership, losing by election after by election after by election, even in ridings that were considered to be Liberal fortresses like Trinity Bellwood in Toronto, the turnaround was a welcome result for Liberals, given the near universal forecasts of oblivion just a few months previous. It wasn't that long ago that they were forecasting the Liberal Party might not even have official party status, back when Trudeau was leading. Now, Conservatives, on the other hand, hand wringing their hands ever since that vote, trying to figure out what went wrong. What were the mistakes that were made? And if there were mistakes, what could have been done in an alternative universe to change the results? Now, there are certain individuals who point to the results and see it as a clear indication that the system is rigged. I'm hearing conservative voices, both online and in person, who are saying, it's all fixed, it's all rigged. Uh, for my own part, I'm not going to go too far down that road. I accept the results. I will point out that the irregularities coming out of that riding in Quebec called Terrebonne do fuel the fire when it comes to these people. It's fixed. What's happening in Terrebonne kind of adds fuel to that. And if you're unfamiliar with what happened in that Terrebonne, it flipped back and forth between the Liberal Party and the Bloc Québécois. Basically, what happened is, as the results were coming in, the live results, so to speak, it had the Liberal Party winning the seat. But then there's a validation process after the votes have been counted on, ongoing. Then they go and they validate the results. And during that validation process, the riding flipped from the Liberals to the Bloc Québécois. But it was so close, anything less than 0.1% mandates it's called a judiciary recount, mandatory recount. So they had this judiciary mandatory recount, and then the riding flipped back to the Liberals, and the recount had the Liberals winning by one single solitary vote. But since that time, since that result was announced, official recount, Liberals win by one vote. Since then, a voter came forward with a mailed in ballot that was returned to sender. And the reason it was returned is because the address on the envelope that Elections Canada had provided had the wrong postal code on it. Just to be clear, the voter hadn't written down the postal code wrong. They had a pre-made envelope with the address already on it. So Elections Canada had gotten their postal code wrong. And now there are reports of 5 additional mail-in ballots that were not included in the final tally. And I'm here to say the optics of this are horrible. And as I say, it just adds fuel to the fire for those who claim the entire election was rigged. Again, I accept the results. And my personal preference with respect to Terrebonne would be for a by-election in that particular riding. And I imagine it wouldn't happen, but my preference would be for no mail-in ballots, no early polls, keep it as simple and as above board as possible. And I just want to put a fine point on the allegations coming out from some conservative voices saying that the election was rigged. Again, I accept the results as legitimate. However, I do recognize there can and often are isolated cases of fraud and irregularities. Happens in every election. Sometimes conservatives are accused of it, sometimes liberals. What I dispute is that any such cases, anyone who says they're systemic in nature, I do not agree with that, or that they are significant enough to impact the results in a significant way. This one riding with Elections Canada printing the wrong postal code on the return envelopes, to me, this is an outlier. And it only affected one single seat. Now, whether the Liberals end up with 169 seats or 170, it doesn't make a huge difference to the makeup of the House of Commons. If it was a question of 171 or 172, that would be more problematic. Okay, so now I want to get on a significant question, and that is, how did the Conservatives go from being up like 20 points in the polls, looking like they were going to win a super with 200 plus seats, to losing on election night? And I'm here to say that those scratching their heads at this result fail to grasp the reality of how Canadians vote in federal elections. Political observers often think in terms of liberal and conservative. But a lot of Canadian voters simply think in terms of the party leaders. And this was very much a binary election between Pierre Poilievre and Mark Carney. It wasn't liberal against conservative. It was Mark Carney versus Pierre Poilievre. Um, and when the conservatives were leading the liberals by 20 or so points in the polls early this year and for a lot of 2024, winning by-elections like Trinity Bellwood, which the liberals, I don't think they had lost it since the 1980s, that area. I'm here to say they weren't romping over the liberals, they were romping over Justin Trudeau. Canadians recognize the abysmal state of our country. Cost of living crisis, housing crisis, rampant crime in large urban centers, our falling standing amongst the world's leading economies. Canada was, and it still is, a mess. And whose fault was it? Not the Liberal Party of Canada, as far as most are concerned. The fault was Justin Trudeau's. He was the one on the nightly news with brain dead virtue signaling, saying stupid things like budgets balance themselves, or that he doesn't give much thought to fiscal or economic policy. Uh, it wasn't that Canadians had fallen in love with Pierre Poilievre or his Conservative Party. They were simply seen as the best alternative to the disaster Justin Trudeau had unleashed on this country for the past nearly 10 years. So when Justin Trudeau announced his intention to resign on January 6th of this year, the script completely flipped. And if you want to check back, I was one of the voices telling conservatives to be careful what they wished for, and that the installation of Mark Carney as leader of the Liberal Party, and ergo as Prime Minister of Canada, that it could completely alter the outcome of what was then the forthcoming election. And as I say, you can check back on my videos from January and February of this year. I was openly musing at that time that a Mark Carney-led Liberal Party could either push the Conservatives down to a minority or possibly even win a minority themselves. I'm not going to give myself too much credit because I did not foresee the Liberals coming as close as they did to a majority mandate. But then I didn't consider the potential looming trade war and Donald J. Trump injecting himself so forcibly in on our election. And I'm also here to say that a lot of Canadians did not know much about Pierre Poilievre before the election. They simply knew that Justin Trudeau was terrible and needed to be gone, and that the Conservatives were the logical replacement. But once Mark Carney was chosen as the leader and installed as the prime minister, the game completely changed. Poilievre could not compete for space on nightly newscasts, not when you have Mark Carney setting off for photo op trips to France and England, not with Carney's role as former head of both the Bank of Canada and Bank of England, and they're being spoken of and written of all over the media. The 20 or so point lead the Conservatives had was based on Trudeau being the leader. And once Justin Trudeau left, the playing field changed. The game was it was a complete restart. And Mark Carney took full advantage of the office of Prime Minister to bolster his chances of winning the election. And the media was fully on Mark Carney's side. After all, think about it, Poilievre and the Conservatives were promising to defund the CBC and to end the subsidization, the subsidies that media outlets like CTV and Global get. So it was in their own best interest to give Carney glowing coverage. They would talk on the nightly news about how Carney successfully steered Canada through the financial crisis of 2008, 2009, even though he had nothing to do with the fact that Canada fared far better than the United States at that time. Why did Canada do so much better than the US? Because of our banking regulations. something the Bank of Canada has no say in. Carney just engaged in the same quantitative easing that all central banks engaged in, including the Federal Reserve Bank in the United States. Governments issued bonds, and the central banks, all of them, created money to purchase those bonds, which injected much needed liquidity into the capital markets. They did it in the US, they did it in Canada. So, why did Canada fare better than the United States? Simply because Americans could not walk away from what is called an underwater mortgage. Americans could walk away, Canadians could not. Say you're a homeowner in the United States and you have a mortgage of 200,000 on a house, but the market price for the house, if it was to go on the market, it's only worth 100,000. Well, what an American could do is they could go to the bank with their keys, drop them, here you go, here are the keys. Your problem now, I'm giving you ownership. Or they mailed the keys in, and the banks actually had a name for it because they were getting so many letters with keys in them, they called it jingle mail. And that was it. Now the American homeowner is off the hook. They owed 200,000 on a house. The house is only 100,000. Here, give it to the bank. Your problem now. In Canada, if someone found themselves in the same situation, owing more than the house was worth, they couldn't just walk away. They would still be responsible for the debt. If a Canadian gave the keys to the house to the bank, then the bank would engage in what we call in Canada, it's called a power of sale, and they would sell the property. So if the amount owing on the mortgage was 200,000 and the house only sold for 100,000, then the former owner of the house was still on the hook for that $100,000. If they declared bankruptcy, then CMHC, Canadian Housing and Mortgage Corporation, the insurance would pay out the difference. So the bank was made whole. And if they didn't have CMHC insurance, they'd have private insurance. But you know what? All that, it's just too detailed. A lot of Canadians simply heard talking heads on CBC saying that Carney was the reason that Canada fared better than the US at that time, and that's all they needed to know. Anyone claiming otherwise with details about why that was not the case, they were simply, he's just playing politics. CBC knows everything. And obviously, the so-called trade war also helped Carney. He was stepping away from the campaign trail to deal with a situation that was being framed as a crisis, and Canadians lapped it up. We've only just learned that during the campaign, Carney basically caved in to US pressure and he lowered the retaliatory tariffs to basically zero. But that fact was hidden from Canadians until after the election. And now that the election is over, Canadians are back to not caring about politics anymore. We're more concerned with Game 7 between Florida and the Leafs tomorrow. The Liberals aren't tabling a budget this spring. Who cares about that? Hopefully, Austin Matthews can score another goal and get Toronto to the conference finals. Carney is pretending to sign American-style executive orders providing $33 billion in financing to our broke government. So what? Can Wall, the Leafs goalie, can he give us another shutout and maybe eventually get us to the Stanley Cup? That's what we're worried about. Politics gets put to the side for now, and we're stuck, for better or worse. We'll see what the Carney Liberal government does. We'll get a very good indication, I believe, on May 27th when King Charles flies over here to mount the throne in our red chamber, the Senate chamber. He'll be reading what is called the throne speech. We're not getting a budget, so the government isn't laying out where Canada's what our fiscal situation is. Not going to be projecting spending, or revenues and how big a deficit. They're not doing any of that. Instead, what we're going to have is King Charles announcing the direction that the government of Canada intends to take over this coming parliamentary session, the challenges they see, and the way those challenges are going to be confronted. There'll be a lot for me to say once that throne speech is read. What I am expecting, I've said it before in other videos, I'm expecting to hear crisis. Carney seems to love the word crisis. He put out a post on Twitter and Facebook talking about Canada. He said Canada is in the biggest crisis of our lifetimes. But he never named what the crisis was. Is he talking about finance? Is he talking about climate change? We don't know. I think we'll have a better idea on May 27th about what he views as the biggest crisis we're facing. He already caved to Donald Trump. We just found out that during the election campaign, he basically eliminated all those tariffs, all those elbows up tariffs. But there, you can cry, whine, bitch, and moan about it. But the fact of the matter is, most of Canadians have gone back to sleep. They'll only start paying attention to politics when our next election comes along, and I'm here to tell you that's probably 3+ years away, somewhere in and around 3 anyway, at the earliest. And thank you for watching. That's about all I had to say for tonight. You're welcome to like again. As I said before, you're welcome to like, subscribe, share, and obviously fill the comment field and tell me your thoughts. You can accuse me of being biased if you like. That accusation got leveled at least once. You're just biased. Yeah, I have a bias, but I'm also open to differing points of view. The only thing I like is if someone says to me, "You're spreading, what you said was false." Don't just say that. Tell me specifically what you think I said was false. Seems fair. He's a liar. What did he lie about? Well, he's just a liar. Sometimes the internet can be brain dead. Anyway, that's enough for now. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you all again whenever my content comes out next.